So in this week's Raja Mandala, you've taken off from Foreign Affairs Minister Jaishankar's visit to Pakistan for the Shanghai Cooperation meeting, the summit meeting there. This is the first visit from an Indian foreign minister in a while, so we tend to, there is
Yeah.
the visual and there's a pageantry to it, I suppose, that people enjoy. But substantively, what could the visit mean?
If you want to be blunt, it will be a nothing burger. I mean, as the Americans say. I think we've argued in the piece, the relationship is not in great shape. If you want to know, one way of thinking about it is when Bilawal Bhutto Zardari came to Goa, the last meeting of SCO, nothing happened. In fact, we talked about terrorism. He said, don't weaponize terrorism. I've been writing and covering about India-Pakistan relations for more than 40 years. But this hype, something is going to happen. But every meeting, we expect drama to come. I think it's understandable because there's so much of shared heritage, a lot of it bitter, but it is a shared relationship. The only good sign, if you will, is really one that Nawaz Sharif, in talking to Barkha Dutt, has said, look, he hoped that the PM Modi had committed to being even nicer, and that he's for improving relations between India and Pakistan. So Sharif, for example, Nawaz Sharif, Prime Minister thrice, and even in the last 3-4 months, he strongly supported normalization of the relationship. But his brother, who is the Prime Minister, even 2 days ago said Kashmir and Gaza.
Yeah.
He was at the UN last month. He talked about Kashmir as the main problem. And of course, so he's really mouthing the army's position. I think Mr. Jaishankar himself has said about a few weeks ago that if Pakistan makes a positive move, India is willing to respond.
So then you take off in the piece after this, and it's an interesting thing that we're looking at Pakistan internally at the moment. I mean, there's Pakistan in turmoil has sort of been a perpetual headline now for quite some time. In the current moment, on its western front, so towards Afghanistan, towards Iran, you're looking at a lot of, and there's an interconnectedness. I mean, I think you trace it to the Iranian Revolution, the Afghanistan, the return of the Taliban, and then the Afghanistan issue going back to the 80s from the Soviet invasion onwards. And then finally, the the Pashtun movements there. The PTM had this jirga. So what in this entire sort of from the Islamic Revolution to then the Mujahideen Pakistan support to now, what has been Pakistan's policy and how do you see it sort of eating itself in that sense?
See, what's happened was, Pakistan was reasonably, we don't call them secular, but they were not ultra-religious until the 1970s. But I think post-71, after the separation of Bangladesh, Mr. Bhutto first and others started playing politics with religion. And this was taken to a new level under Zia-ul-Haq. So Zia-ul-Haq consciously tried to Islamize Pakistan society, which was not the case before. Their army officers drank whiskey just like most of us. They were fairly liberal in their social life. And very few army officers were growing beards like you and me. So I think it was a fairly, in fact, its claim in the world in the 50s and 60s was that it was a, liberal Islamic state. Well, it had irredentism, it had territorial disputes with India. But it was not a fanatic Islamic country. But I think it was Zia who really in the 80s transformed Pakistan into a religious state. And I think that coincided with the Russian intervention and the mobilization of jihad by Americans, by the Saudis, and Pakistan was a frontline state. So the jihad externally coincided with the Islamization of Pakistan. And since then, Musharraf tried briefly to reverse it, but it has not happened, and it's gotten worse and worse. So you have, a few days ago, Mr. Zakir Naik was invited officially by Pakistan and meets the Prime Minister. So I think they're trapped in their own radical ideology and they're struggling to come out of it. It's a big problem for them. So I think the issue, that's where I think it's important to understand what's happening on the other side. So this is not just about us between India and Pakistan. We tend to see that the developments in Afghanistan and Iran and the Middle East have had powerful impact on Pakistan's evolution. And today, again, we are at a moment where that region is up in flames and things could happen. And then we talk about the turmoil in the Pashtun borderlands. See, I mean, historically, the British, Britain had dominated these regions, but largely loosely administered. The tribes were left to themselves. But what happened after 79, when the Soviet intervention took place? The arrival of jihad from Arabia, and the bringing of arms, religious extremism. So you had actually the massive use of the Pashtun territories to destabilize Soviet-controlled Afghanistan. And since then, over the last 50 years, it's become a den of, then Osama bin Laden showed up. You had the Central Asian jihadis staying there. So it's become a place where all kinds of extremists have gathered. And this has created huge problems for the Afghan Pashtun people. So I think 40, 50 years of jihad in the Pashtun lands actually turned that region into a real tinderbox. And now you have multiple formations there emerging. The Taliban has come back with its own ideology. It doesn't obey Pakistan's diktat. You have the TTP, which wants to carve out the Sharia zones within the Pashtun regions. Then you have the PTM, which is a more positive, peaceful, progressive force that is seeking basic rights and respect for the Pashtun people. So I think the Pashtuns are almost 40 million people. If you say, look, the Afghan crisis of the last 50 years was really about the Pashtuns.
Yeah.
So I think it is really today, that's the main point we're making. The Pashtun lands are in turmoil. And that will have a huge effect on Pakistan. And if it has an effect on Pakistan, it's going to have an effect on India and the whole of the subcontinent. I think that's what, India, there is not enough attention to that.
Right.
We just only focused on what Mr. Jaishankar will do, what's happening between India and Pakistan today, rather than the deep structural tendencies. So it's not just internal to Pakistan. It's really about Afghans. It's about Afghanistan, the Pashtun territorial structure. The Durand line is not accepted by the Taliban. It's not accepted by the TTP. Nobody accepts it. So I think there are huge issues hidden in the Durand line, which are now coming to the fore. And I think they'll have a huge effect on the structure of international relations in South Asia. Yeah.
No, sir, but what we're looking at also, something you bring up is interesting, right? There's this PTM, for example. How is the Pakistan government handling it? This internal talk. India has had its own share of that, in whether so we've had
No,
it in
this is
Kashmir.
much bigger. This is in
Yeah,
Pakistan, PTM. No, they were denied all rights. I mean, you have
yeah,
members of parliament, arrested arbitrarily, and the demands them speaks for themselves. People are disappeared. You know how the government makes people disappear. They, treated very brutally. Unfortunately, much of the world doesn't pay attention. There's so much attention to Kashmir and these other issues, but very little to the Pashtun rights. And PTM is actually a peaceful force, and they mobilize people in large numbers and not resorted to violence, but yet the world does not pay much attention to them. So I think the PTM has grown in strength, but Pakistan has recently banned it just at the beginning of this month. And that tells you their attitude. But I think the problem is, in spite of that, they've organized this jirga. They've come up with these demands. One, free trade and free movement across the Durand line. Second is the need to release all the political prisoners and to use resources of the land for themselves. So I think these are logical demands like many states in India have. But I think it's going to be hard because whether Pakistan will actually give those rights. And I think, the main demand was that both the Pakistan army and the militant groups should get out of their lands in 2 months. So this is what they're asking for. Of course, the Pakistan army is not going to comply with it. So it tells you the disaffection with counter-terrorist operations that have been going on for long.
Thanks so much. Everyone read the column. It's on the IndianExpress.com. Thank you so much.